Hi, everyone. I want to put out this video just to address a couple of things that people apparently they still don't understand it and they still have questions regarding Sarah Davis and why would Yellowstone have contacted Forrest Fenn, or some people believe Forrest Fenn contacted them, and if it wasn't in the park, which, as most of the people know that actually went over the poem, there's just no way that the treasure chest was at 9 Mile Hole. That's just a bunch of BS that you're being fed that has is not been proven at all, not even in the slightest. But the biggest thing that people are trying to use is, well, Sarah Davis, the park ranger. Why would she be there? Well, first of all, I want to just explain to you, Sarah Davis works essentially for the Department of the Interior. Okay. The Department of Interior and the Department of Justice and Sarah Davis were apparently with Forrest Fenn and Jack on that Zoom call in August of 2020. So I just want to remind you again. Now, Sarah Davis had said, and this is documented on legal documents from the Zoom call, that the treasure chest was found on land managed by the Department of Interior. And she also went on. Now, she didn't classify what type of land it was. She just said it's on public land managed by the Department of Interior. So let me show you here what types of land the Department of Interior manages. They manage all Indian land through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. With all of these bureaus, all fall under the Department of Interior. So we got Indian land, okay, Bureau of Indian Education, Bureau of Land Management. That's BLM land, which is really the least restrictive of all the land types as far as if you wanted to hide a treasure. And then Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Bureau of Reclamation. Now, there are quite a few areas out there. For example, the Lucky MC Mines, and also just east of Du Bois, there's a big reclamation area that they had back from in the mining days that the government took over and cleaned it up. So they managed that land. Um, they manage national parks, of course. They manage surface mining and reclamation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. You'll notice that's one of the ones that's over by, for example, Sinks Canyon, okay, where the brown trout spawn at the rise. They manage all of that, okay. So they manage all this land. So essentially, what Sarah Davis told you was that it's on any one of these types of lands. But let's continue a little bit further. She also said that the reason why they don't want the place known is because the land that it was on does not have the infrastructure to handle large amounts of tourists. If you look at that, okay, obviously a national park handles millions of tourists. It's got infrastructure, okay? They got rangers on site. It's got gated entrances and exits, okay, where people have to pass through. It's got hotels. It's got every single thing in there to manage people. It's got boardwalks for people to walk. It's policed. Okay, so that doesn't qualify as land that doesn't have the infrastructure to handle a large amount of tourists. But if you go through other lands, for example, Fish and Wildlife would also manage the Bighorn Recreation Area. Okay, that's government land, but they don't have any gates there. They don't have any rangers on site there. They don't actively manage it. What they do, and the same thing with BLM land, okay, like Five Springs Campground, where my sob is, that land, and also BLM would manage Sinks Canyon, right? So those areas don't have a staff there. They don't have gates. They don't charge admission. What they do is they have rangers that are stationed in a certain area of the state, and they would be in charge of going and keeping an eye on BLM land and on reclamation areas and stuff like that. So whenever an issue comes up, they gather rangers, usually senior rangers, such as Sarah Davis, and they would have her leave the park and go and check at wherever land they're sending them to, whatever it falls under here. They got something for her to do. That is her job. Okay, so primarily, yes, she's in Yellowstone, but that's where she is stationed. That's where her office was. Okay. Now, if you remember correctly, it took her like 2 weeks to investigate this area. And as Toby pointed out, being stationed in that park, she was only 2 hours away from any location in the park. It would not have taken her 2 weeks to go and examine the area unless she was leaving the park, which obviously makes a lot more sense because those areas don't have the infrastructure. And there's quite a few of them. It's not just where my solve is. There's a lot of them right outside Yellowstone in Montana, right outside Yellowstone, in between Yellowstone and Cody and down by Lander and over by the Bighorns. So that's the Northwest Wyoming. So the rangers that work there and their managers would be in charge of going to all of these places: BLM land, Indian land, national parks, that's and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. She's in charge of all of those areas. Okay, so keep that in mind. That would be a reason why they would contact the ranger. Okay, that's number one. I just want to make this perfectly clear that she said the Department of Interior, which includes all of the land, pretty much everything that the government owns, is managed by the Department of the Interior, and they got sub branches in there. Okay, but all of the rangers, like I said, they don't have a staff on BLM land. What they'll do is they'll grab the nearest ranger office and they'll send them to wherever area they need to go. Okay, especially when they got a big investigation, and I'm gonna get to that in a second. So if they got something that they consider a high priority, they're gonna send a senior person there. So that's why Sarah Davis would have been sent out there. It has nothing to do with the fact that her office was in Yellowstone National Park. Not at all. Not even close. Okay. And in fact, you could even say to the contrary because she didn't say it was in the national park. She didn't classify the land type other than it doesn't have infrastructure to handle large amount of tourists. So to me, that means that it was on public land managed by the Department of Interior that doesn't have gated entrances and exits, doesn't have a staff of rangers there. It's unmanaged, quote unquote. It doesn't have trails that are managed or watched over by the rangers to make sure people don't deviate from the trails and so on and so forth. Whereas in Yellowstone, if you start wandering off of trails in dangerous areas, you're going to be approached by a ranger and told to get where you're supposed to be. So they have really strict rules there. Now in a national park, you can't fly drones, you can't dig. Technically, if you find an artifact, you can't take it. You're stealing. You can get in a lot of trouble for that. Okay, you're not allowed to do that. Okay, so people out there bragging about taking arrowheads, you might want to be careful who you say that to because you broke the law. You have no right to take anything from that park. Okay, so and that was even stated by Forrest. If the treasure chest was hidden in the park, you are required to bring it to the park superintendent. If you found something there, you're required. It's not like maybe you should. It's no, you're required to bring it there. And then they will then look at it, which of course goes on the public record, and they would investigate it. Okay. So you're required, like he said. So that'd be very restrictive. Now, national forests, you are allowed to fly drones. So they got a little bit less restrictions in national forests. Well, BLM land is even less restrictive. There's no reason why you couldn't, for example, hide a geocache or a treasure chest there. Now, I went over this once before, but you are allowed to hide a geocache in Yellowstone. Okay. However, in order to do that, go read the rules. You first of all, I believe, and I'm going off of memory here, you have to notify the park superintendent and let him know where you're hiding it. Okay. So he has to be aware of it. You can't just go and put something there on your own. You have to tell them. Okay. That's number one. Number two, I believe it can't be worth more than $1,000. Number three, it can't be there longer than a year. So you would have to go there and essentially move it if nobody found the geocache or whatever. So certainly, there's really no way you could debate it. It would be illegal to put the chest there. And a lot of people say, well, what if Forrest Fenn made a deal? He didn't make a deal with the government. The government had open cases in the FBI against him. He didn't make no deals. Okay. That's not up to a Sarah Davis. They don't take that kind of stuff lightly. And I'm going to show you something right now that proves that Forrest Fenn didn't contact them. It was the other way around. So the first thing I want to show you, this is in 2017. This is from Powell, the Powell Tribune in Wyoming. Read that. I'll leave it here. I'm not going to read it to you, but read that. Okay. Essentially, the Park County sheriff joined in with the New Mexico sheriff wanting Forrest Fenn to call it off. This is in 2017. So there was a lot going on with the United States government, the parks, the rangers, and so on and so forth. They were in contact with Forrest for many years, all the way back from June 2013 in this article, where you could talk. They were getting mad because it started to become an expense. They had rescues, they had people getting injured and hurt, which of course puts the rescuers at risk when they have to go and rescue some bonehead that's doing something stupid. So they were in contact with Forrest Fenn very frequently. This is July 2017. Now, check this out. Here's a document that somebody, I guess, did a FOIA request. I guess this is the person that did the FOIA request in July 30th of 2020. This is like probably a week after. It was near the end of July when Forrest Fenn came out and announced that it was found in the state of Wyoming. When that happened, okay, it triggers a lot of eyes are open now, right? All of a sudden, including the United States government's going to go, oh, if it was in Wyoming, we better get Forrest Fenn on the phone here, and we better do a investigation, because if it was on land that it's not supposed to be on, essentially we're going to nail his ass to the cross, okay? Because you're not allowed to just do as you please. I know that Forrest Fenn was a maverick, he was a rebel, but he's not going to do something stupid like that, because essentially, first of all, the person who bought the chest to them would likely never get it back, because what they would do is they would make that person, in Forrest Fenn's estate, if he was dead, responsible for all of the rescues, because they would essentially prove, okay, well, if the chest was in Yellowstone, then anybody that got injured in Yellowstone was there to find your treasure chest. And they had to be in Yellowstone in order to find it. So we're going to hold you accountable for it. Now, whether or not they would win the lawsuits is of course up for date, but they would have tied you up, and all this would have been public record. Okay. Now remember, Forrest Fenn announced it in July of 2020. It was only a few weeks later that they had the Zoom call. Now, why would that be? Imagine that you're a detective. Why would that be? Here they have a man that they've been dealing with for years. They've got multiple states telling them to call off the treasure chest. And as you're going to see, they have tons of letters back and forth to Forrest, because they were getting pissed off due to all of the rescues and all of the issues that were happening. So the minute they found out it was in Wyoming, they wanted to find out where was it in Wyoming. And that's where it goes back to Sarah Davis, where based on what she said, we know it was land managed by the Department of Interior, but we also know it didn't have the kind of infrastructure that a national park would have. And we also know that there were no charges against Jack and no charges against Forrest, right? So we have plenty of evidence to the contrary that proves that it wouldn't have been there, because those things would have happened had it been there, right? They can't just decide, well, we're not going to do anything about it. They're going to investigate it, and it will be part of the public record. And there is no public record anywhere of a treasure chest being found there. Now, I know some people that did FOIA requests to get Sarah Davis's calendar, but what the hell does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Obviously, they're going to send her to Berry Falls and various other places in the park. That's where she is. That's her job, right? So she's going to spend time going to them places. You know, show me where any of that documentation says that there was a treasure chest there. It doesn't. Okay. The only people trying to prove this, they're doing it through email screenshots. There's no evidence that any of those emails weren't pre-planned in order for the chase to be called off, which is what I believe happened. I believe that Forrest Fenn was pressured by the government. He was pressured by his family, and they hired Jack, and they called it off. And it's as simple as that. Okay. I don't believe it was a hoax, and that would explain why Forrest is mad. He didn't want to have it called off, but he was forced into a situation where they had to call it off. I also don't believe that Jack sold the treasure chest. I believe he might have given it to him for $1 because you notice we don't see any sales receipts, right? So he can actually be part of the LLC, and this is just their attempt at selling off the assets. Okay. And notice that they don't say treasure chest. They say Forrest Fenn's treasure because they can't say that it was in found treasure. They can't make that claim. They have no way of proving anything other than the fact that Forrest Fenn owned these items at one point. They've proven that through the affidavits, but they haven't proven that it was actually in a discovered treasure chest. And that, incidentally, may be why they're not selling the treasure chest. Who knows? You can speculate all day on that. But if you look at this FOIA request, this contains all emails exchanges that went back and forth to Forrest Fenn from national parks and not just Yellowstone. And this goes back many years. You'll see. You could go ahead and read this yourself. This is online. You can find it. And they got most of the stuff redacted. They don't want personal information out there. But here we go. NPS.gov alert, treasure hunter known as blah, blah, blah. Inbound to Yellowstone. Okay, this is October 29th, 2014. Hello, Mr. Fenn. I'm forwarding this email that came to Yellowstone Park from someone named Anonymous. We had several treasure hunters in the park, blah, blah, blah. So they're complaining to Forrest Fenn. They make phone calls back and forth, and they communicated with Forrest Fenn. Forrest Fenn replies back to them. So remember, this is 2014. This has been going on for years. Okay, I'm just going to scroll through this. There's far too many for me to look at. So let's go down a little bit more, and this Rosa Taro, whoever the heck that is, really got back and forth with Forrest Fenn a lot. But remember, this is, like I said, this is Yellowstone. And I'm scrolling through this. You could see it. You could read it for yourself. Here's another one in 2016. So this is 2016, 2017. Talking about somebody named Murphy, the national park. So keep in mind, this is all building up over the years. It's building up. The government's getting pissed off. They got rescues. They got people destroying the park. They got people doing all kinds of crazy things. Okay. Now the New Mexico sheriff comes out. He says, I want to call this thing off. Other states joined in. So, here's law enforcement office of Yellowstone National Park, Sarah Buska. So this ain't Sarah Davis, no, but we're involving the National Park Service, which is the Department of the Interior, and of course the Department of Justice are involved. And you can see all these emails going back. There's tons of them, tons of them. There's another Public Affairs Office, Yellowstone National Park. There's incidents. This one is, I know there's one in Colorado somewhere. No, this is Yellowstone again. A rescue that they had. They're complaining to Forrest Fenn. Here's another incident report. Trespassing. Trying to find out where there's one. This is Yellowstone again. Most of these are Yellowstone, but I believe, like I said, there's one in here from Colorado. Well, here's one, Glacier National Park up in Montana. So here, this is, the Department of the Interior going back and forth with Forrest Fenn over the years, all the way back since 2013. Of course, they were pissed off. Forrest Fenn didn't contact the national park. They've been in contact with him for years about all of this stuff. So there you go. I mean, pretty much this is evidence that it was not in the park. With all of this stuff going on, do you honestly believe that they would just pat Forrest on the back, not make any record of the treasure chest being there, and just let him get away with it? After they find all these other searchers, okay? Imagine what those searchers would feel. Hey, I got trespassing. I got fined. I got fined for digging. Why did you let Forrest Fenn go and bury a chest in Yellowstone National Park? That's our land. We own the treasure chest. Then there's just no way. Okay, And here's one in 1/6/2020. So it's January. Law enforcement, Yellowstone again. So yeah, you could bet your butt that when Forrest Fenn came out in July and said, "Oh, it was in Wyoming," of course they're going to get the Wyoming Rangers to look into it. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why. And no, it's not because it was found in Yellowstone. If it was, you would have seen a lot of stuff that would have occurred if that was the case, and it didn't. It would all be public record. So there you go, folks. That's why Sarah Davis was there. It has nothing to do Yellowstone was involved. Sarah Davis was employed by the Department of the Interior. She represented them. She's a senior ranger, right? When you look in a state, okay, that has government run land that's managed by the Department of Interior, they don't have staff on site at reclamation locations, at BLM locations, at they probably do on Indian land, and they probably do in national parks, but they don't have them. What they do is they grab the nearest location, and that's where they send them out to go investigate the area. So, like a BLM, like for example, Five Springs, maybe once a week, it's on some ranger's list to go check it. But again, they don't. Like I said, they don't have people there at those places 100% of the time. You know, Buffalo Bill Reservoir. Do you think they have somebody there all the time? Probably not. They call somebody out of the park. That's the way it works. Okay. They don't oh yeah, Sarah Davis worked in Yellowstone. It's there, blah blah. No, no, anybody that believes that stuff, I got a bridge to sell you. Okay. It's over in Brooklyn, New York. Hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving and have a great weekend. Peace.